how are you dealing with this sudden fame and success and all eyes on you?
I think I had a pretty rough, wow, it's actually crazy. I had a very rough high school.
Yeah.
I became an RCL member in grade 9. So I became prefect in grade 9, where it is normal for matric students to be in grade 9. So when I arrived in grade 8, started doing public speaking, a lot of the school kids knew me. I was the first to ever be a prefect at that grade. So I experienced a lot of bullying. Then, fortunately for me, unfortunately for them, I then moved on to provincial RCL, became deputy president, got to move on. So I started getting national colors, I started traveling, I started being recognized. And I think within the group and some people within school didn't appreciate that. Like for argument's sake, when I was in grade 11 and they were in matric, I was president of RCL. And I had been in the RCL
like,
for already 3 years, you know what I mean? Which made it hard, and I had to learn how to deal. Also, I was very into debating and politics. I remember I had a hit out from COSAS because I went to, I love you guys. I went to a COSAS workshop where we were speaking about the importance of RCL. Because they were actually the people who established RCL. And when I got there, I didn't speak like them, I didn't look like them, and it caused a problem. But I spoke out vocally and said, just because I don't speak like you don't mean I don't understand. I come from the same community.
Exactly.
You know, my mom is in debt for me to be in a slightly different community, not much different from yours. I wasn't much liked after that, so I was targeted. I had officials my teacher used to walk me to class. Mr. Shella, God bless his soul, used to walk me from English to maths. So I think by the time I got into the fame space, I was okay with being myself. I had gotten to a point where I'm just like, I might. And I don't have to fit in anywhere, and I don't have to go through the system like everybody else. I was okay with sounding rural, and I was okay with not having the it clothes, because I lived on thrift clothing because my mom couldn't afford. I started working at the age of 15 as a waitress to have taxi money to go to school. So I felt like my struggles were so real, I couldn't care what everybody's boxes were. It was just like, but you don't know me.
And where does your faith coming in all of this?
My faith is it. My faith is it. I think I always say the best gift my mother has ever given me was Jesus Christ. The ability to tell me that my identity is found in Christ, and that I succeed because of that and nothing else. No amount of exposure, no amount of money, no amount can package me more than what God has already given me. And I think that freed me from a lot of pressures. But I think it gave me an opportunity to explore, because, you know, I say this, and I said it a couple of weeks ago. I was speaking to young people and I was saying, I've never handed in my CV. And I've been working for so many years, for over a decade. I've never sat across somebody and tried to justify why I need a job. So it's just like being faithful with God. Sometimes you look like an idiot in front of everybody. Sometimes you look like the slow girl who is not with the swag. But God rewards you in many ways that if I was to really sit back and reflect, how do I leave this faith? Because it's all I know.
It's worked for
How
me.
do I leave this faith? Because I am where I'm at because of it. So it doesn't play a role, it is the role. I don't know if that makes any sense.
And at what age were you conscious of that? And at what age did you accept the Lord?
I grew up in a Christian background. My dad was a pastor before he passed. My mom, like I said, strong woman of God, very vocal, unapologetic about, you know, loving God. I think for me, when I was 14, I made the decision to remain a virgin until I'm married. And I remember there was something called the silver ring thing, so I wore it to school, and my LO teacher's like, what's that ring? You're not allowed to. I was like, the Indians are allowed to wear the red things, and this one's not allowed to. And she was like, okay, cool. If you are going to argue to wear that ring, you must stand in front of the whole school and justify why it is important to stay pure before marriage. I was in grade 8 at senior assembly, on a Monday morning, justifying why purity is necessary.
My goodness.
So that resilience, that idea of being mocked, that idea of you look like the fool came very early. So I got comfortable with the idea of not being like everybody else. I lived on scriptures like, we're not of this world, John 17. I lived on scriptures like, 2 Timothy, that we are supposed to be examples in speech and purity and in conduct. And being an example sometimes means that, not even sometimes, most times it means you're not doing everything like everybody else because you are the example. So they're supposed to follow suit. Really difficult, but what a grounding force for me.
So much so that even as a professional, in the glare of the public eye, you still reaffirmed that belief.
Yeah.
This time for the whole world to hear. I think you were 25.
Yeah.
And said, I'm a virgin.
That was such an
Proudly
awkward...
so. Tell me more. And my gosh, did you send ripple effects throughout the entire country?
That wasn't even the intention. So I was like, oh, you pulled a Kelly. I was like, I wasn't even trying to even talk about that. I was invited on a talk show and they had different women and they were like, the topic was what women want. So it was like what women want in career, what women want in, and then what women in bed. And they're like, started talking like 50 Shades type of conversation. I was like, oh, they don't want anything. They're like, what do you mean? And I was like, yo, man, I'm like waiting for marriage. So at this present moment in time, I can't say I know what I want. I know that I want a loving relationship that is fruitful and fulfilling, but from a sexual point of view, I can't comment. And the host was just like, hang on. So instead of that segment turning into everybody sharing what they want in bed, it became...
Like, zoom in. Yeah.
So what's happening with you? How did this start? Whatever. And in that interview, I was made to feel uncomfortable about my decision, and callers called in. They said I'm lying, said all sorts of things. And one of the callers said to me, or one of the guests said, it's important that women know themselves sexually. And she gave a whole woke statement, which was okay. I mean, each to
his own.
Yeah. And she said to me, you've got to go out there, find out what you want and test drive and whatever. And I was like, for me, if you're giving to me the concept of test driving, then I must accept in the same breath to be test driven. And I can't accept that. And I can't accept that you would tell that to your daughter. That open yourself to be test driven by multiple of men so that you can know yourself sexually. And I'm like, that can't be the narrative. And you can't possibly believe that. And, they quickly cut me and that was the end of the interview. But it sparked such a conversation. I think we trended... like for the rest of that week, the hashtag was #PurityIsPossible, and I didn't even start the hashtag. And everyone was like,
you
"Oh,
became
that hashtag."
the face.
Yeah,
you became the face.
And it's like you started. I was like, "Yo, I didn't even start it." I always speak from my conviction that I believe that that's what God requires of me. I believe it's in His Word, and that as His children we should adhere to it. But I feel like conviction gets us further than just reading something. If the Word is not rhema to you, then it's not alive.
Yeah.
Yeah.